Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive into this, because today we are tackling a massive, literally life-changing promise: mastering your anger once and for all. If you have ever felt that hot flush of frustration just completely override your better judgment, well, you know exactly how paralyzing that loss of control can be. Today we're unpacking the Stoic Guide to Mastering Temper. We'll be drawing heavily on the ancient wisdom of thinkers like Seneca, a guy who actually dedicated an entire treatise to this specific emotion, famously calling anger a brief insanity. The goal here isn't just some temporary band-aid fix or a quick breathing exercise. No, we're talking about a fundamental, permanent shift in how you process the world around you. It's a cognitive framework designed to intercept frustration before it ever even has the chance to escalate.
I want you to think back for just a second. When was the absolute last time you completely lost your cool, like totally snapped? What actually happened in your brain during that exact moment? Well, according to Stoic psychology, anger doesn't just happen to us out of nowhere. It's actually triggered by a sudden, jarring clash between what we expected to happen and what reality actually delivered. The philosopher Epictetus pointed out that it isn't events themselves that disturb us, it's our judgments about those events. When we lose control, it's because our mind has instantly and unconsciously agreed with this false idea that we've been fundamentally harmed. That split second where the rational mind simply shuts off and raw, unfiltered reaction takes the wheel, that is precisely the vulnerability we are targeting today. Understanding that mechanical breakdown in our own reasoning is absolutely the first critical step to solving the anger problem.
And the cost of that breakdown? It is immediate and it is intensely destructive. When we surrender to anger, we aren't just having a bad moment. We are experiencing severe cognitive impairment. Modern psychology actually confirms what the Stoics knew 2,000 years ago. Anger actively shuts down your prefrontal cortex. That's the logical, reasoning part of your brain. Your executive function just shatters. Your blood pressure spikes. You literally lose the ability to accurately assess reality. You end up saying these cruel things you can never ever take back. Not because you're a bad person, but because you are temporarily locked in a state of hyper-reactivity. This reactive loss of temper creates a vicious feedback loop. It warps your perception, makes you feel totally justified in your rage, all while actively sabotaging your relationships and hijacking your peace of mind. Okay, let's just take a breath here. Because the Stoic mindset is the exact opposite of that chaos. Now, the Stoic guide isn't about ignoring your feelings, and it for sure isn't about bottling them up until they explode later. The word Stoic gets a pretty bad rep in modern culture, right? People mistakenly think it means acting like a cold, unfeeling stone. But in reality, it's an incredibly authoritative, deeply grounding tool. It's a structured framework focused entirely on mastering and intercepting emotion, rather than just suppressing it. The Stoics aimed for a state they called apatheia. Actually, scratch that. It doesn't mean apathy, it means freedom from irrational disturbance. It is the profound, tranquil realization that while you cannot control the chaos happening around you, you have absolute, unshakable authority over your own internal response.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast between a purely reactive state and a reasoned Stoic state. The reactive temper is chaotic. It's exactly like a pinball bouncing wildly off whatever external obstacle hits it. When someone hurls an insult, the reactive mind instantly absorbs it and fires right back, giving all of its power away to the trigger and letting the outside world dictate its internal state. The Stoic mind, however, operates fundamentally differently. It is intentional, reasoned, and perfectly calm. It places this thick, protective cognitive buffer right between the external event and the internal reaction. It's the profound difference between being violently tossed around by a hurricane and choosing to be the calm, untouchable eye at the very center of it. The Stoic mind simply refuses to grant entry to unexamined impressions. Which brings us directly to the bold, frankly uncompromising claim of our source material today: how to never lose your temper again. Now, this isn't just some catchy subtitle designed to grab your attention. It's a highly instructional, empowering promise based on one core Stoic principle: anger requires your assent. It literally requires your permission to exist. Because anger is ultimately a judgment that you have been wronged. If you can just withhold that judgment, the anger simply cannot form. You have the inherent capability to completely rewire your baseline responses. This isn't just high-level philosophical theory. It's an empowering, highly practical toolkit that you can literally apply the very next time you feel that familiar heat rising in your chest.
So how do we actually execute this? Well, a lost temper is, at its root, a physical and biological reaction that we can learn to intercept. So the crucial point is breaking this down into three clear components:
First, acknowledge the anger. Don't push it down in denial, just clearly identify that an impression of harm has just entered your mind. Second, create a pause. Seneca advised that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. That tiny little gap in time between the external trigger and your internal response, that is exactly where your freedom lies. It gives your prefrontal cortex time to come back online. And third, apply philosophical reason. Ask yourself, does this actually matter? Is the situation even within my control? By doing this, you aren't aggressively fighting the emotion, you are just cleanly disarming it with logic. Let's move to and see how this builds into a totally actionable blueprint for your daily life looking through a historical lens. Consider the Roman statesman Cato. He was famously spit on by a political rival, but instead of exploding, Cato simply wiped his face and calmly stated that the man was clearly mistaken in his behavior. Step 1. Recognize the trigger. Cato knew the environment was hostile and anticipated the provocation. Step 2. Apply the Stoic guide. He utilized the intentional pause, refusing to validate the insult. He forced rationality into a superheated situation. Step 3. Retain your temper. By keeping his cool, he completely disempowered his attacker and maintained his own dignity. This is the real-world application of the philosophy, guys. It's a repeatable cognitive sequence you can lean on every single time you are tested. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the emphasis on the word daily. Mastery is an intentional, daily practice. You aren't going to just watch an explainer once and magically become this tranquil master who's immune to all worldly frustrations. True mastery is forged in everyday, mundane annoyances. Back then, Epictetus used the example of the public bathhouse, the splashing, the jostling, the thieves. Today, that translates to the passive-aggressive coworker, a sudden flight cancellation, or deeply unfair criticism from a boss. These aren't just frustrating annoyances. They are your daily training ground. It's cognitive weightlifting. Every minor frustration is a golden opportunity to practice the pause, evaluate the impression, and strengthen your stoic muscle so that when a major crisis hits, your baseline is already securely anchored in logic. Because tomorrow, if you do not actively step in to intercept your emotions, the outside world will gladly do it for you, dictating your mood and your day through every single minor inconvenience. The environment will constantly test your boundaries and demand a reaction. But if you apply this Stoic framework, if you commit to practicing that delay and interrogating your own judgments, you permanently reclaim the driver's seat of your life. So I'll leave you with this. When you inevitably face your next moment of intense frustration, because we both know it's coming, will you hand over your power or will you be the one completely in control?